Good afternoon. I know there's more of us joining. So far, we have 64 and climbing. I wanted to take this moment to welcome you to Building an Age-Inclusive New York City, Part 2, Putting It into Practice. But before I continue speaking, I just want to think of all, the folks in Brooklyn who were affected yesterday, and really, again, a showing of New York City strong, everyday New Yorkers stepping up, our, public servants stepping up. So I really wanted to take this moment to lift New York City up and all of us here today. Thank you. And so before we begin, right, we'll start some housekeeping rules. Everyone's going to be muted upon entry, and please remain so throughout the session. Thank you in advance. Please do use the chat. We want to hear from you. If you were here the last time, there's pop-up surveys. There's going to be questions. Today is full of wealth of information. So please, we want to hear from you in the chat. Closed caption is available, so please choose the live transcript option, which should be at the bottom of your screen. There will be a Q&A, so please, definitely stay through and be present and participate. Thank you in advance for answering the poll questions. They're very important, right? It really informs, how do we continue providing this valuable resource to you. And a copy of these slides and all the additional resources will be shared after the event. And as I said, we are the City of New York. Let's represent, right? Stay engaged and present. Thank you. And spread the word, right? Social media. So our wonderful partners at, DCAS is at NYC DCAS, and DFTA is at NYC Seniors. Here are the hashtags. If you can think of other hashtags, please use them. Do share this wealth of information from today. Very exciting. And so today, as I said earlier, it's going to be a wealth of information. We're going to put this into practice. We're going to have icebreakers. We're going to review part 1, lots of information there. We have 2 wonderful subject matter experts in this, Dr. Tracy Gendron and Kamika Dempsey. We're going to hear from our friends, colleagues at DCAS around best practices. And then we're going to have some breakout rooms. This is going to be wonderful. You're going to put it into practice. You're going to learn from each other and how we're going to move forward. There'll be remarks also from our colleague here at DFTA, Marlo Paraíso, around Silver Star. It's a really fantastic program. And then, right, we'll have some closing remarks, Q&A, and then a call to action. So let's take it away.
All right, thank you. My name is Patrice Williams. I am the Chief of Staff with DCAS's Citywide Equity and Inclusion line of service, and I will be taking us through our icebreaker activity for today. So it's going to be a poll question. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. As you're taking or selecting your responses, I'll read out the question and your possible responses. So Local Law 121 of 2020 mandates all city employees to be biennially trained on which of the following topics? Your selections are sexual harassment prevention, disability rights and etiquette, harassment and discrimination based on age, or all of the above. I will conclude the poll once we get a suitable response rate. I'm looking for something above 70%. Currently, we're at 55 and climbing. 62%. All right. I actually think we might be able to make it to 100%. The response rate has been amazing thus far. All right, I'll give it a couple more seconds for those folks that are pondering this question deeply. All right, so I'll conclude the poll now. and I will share the results. For this particular question, the response that we were looking for is harassment and discrimination based on age. DCAS recently updated and released the Everybody Matters training that was done earlier this year. And that was done to incorporate materials on age discrimination. And that was done for us to remain in compliance with Local Law 121, which made this training mandatory for all employees every 2 years. So thank you for your participation in this poll, and hopefully for those of you that did not hit upon the right response or the response we were looking for, you know a little bit more about Local Law 121. And now I will invite folks to respond to this prompt in the chat. So we're looking for some feedback. So we would like you to share your thoughts. What have you done or thought about differently as it relates to age inclusion since we last met on March 24th? So during that session, we shared a lot of great information. I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Yvette Santiago, who is DFTA's P3 Office Associate, to review some key insights. But as she's going through the key insights, please be sure to enter some responses in the chat. Thank you. Yvette?
Thank you, Pat. And Pat and I, we had a quick dry run about that, and him stating my title. It could get a bit people could get a bit tongue twisted around that. But we'd like to just give you an overview of some of the lessons learned and key insights from our March 24th event. So if we focus on the benefits of age-inclusive strategies, mixed age teams lead to better organizational performance. You can leverage a diverse set of skills by having others engage in upskilling, sort of mentoring, and other different techniques to increase performance and productivity within organizations. One of the other benefits is to help eradicate the triple jeopardy: ageism, sexism, racism. We'd like to help increase employee retention and avoid litigation. Some of the tips that we learned for DEI officers and hiring professionals are to focus on eliminating ageist language, including descriptions such as tech savvy, digital native, being flexible and energetic in those job descriptions. Try not to ignore applicants with a college graduation date of 20 years ago, or those that are using an email address that includes AOL.com. So those are some of the highlights that were mentioned, that we picked out from the 24th, the March 24th event. And when we surveyed everyone to find out what type of resources they would like to develop a more holistic approach to DEI efforts, guest speaker series came up at the top. Trainings, folks are interested in trainings and workshops and webinars. So as we move forward and develop other events, we're going to keep this feedback in mind to help move us along in with offering the things that you all are looking for. And I'm going to move to the chat now to see what kind of feedback we've received. Okay. So M. Yee would like to get info on our agency's demographics. Crystal Simmons says that she has reviewed their job postings and she notices that our job posting notice to ensure ageist language that is not included. So she's definitely going to use that strategy to make sure there's no ageist language. Chantel Sanatus, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, is thinking more about how unintentionally patronizing behavior. So she's keeping that in mind and sort of seeing how that shows up. Marlene Marco wants to make sure that HR is redacting age indicators on resumes as candidates were being reviewed for current job offerings. And let's see, a couple more. Angelita McDonald, she dispersed information shared with unit leaders. Stephanie Yang reviewed job openings and job descriptions for ageist language. That's great. That's
These
great.
are great actions.
Yeah, so folks seem to really have taken away lots of key nuggets from our 24th event. Okay, thank you all for participating. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Maritza to introduce our speaker, our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. So exciting to see already action being taken from our part one. Thank you, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tracy Gendron. She serves as chair for the Virginia Commonwealth University Department of Gerontology and is a board member for the American Society on Aging. Dr. Gendron has over 25 years of experience as a gerontologist and has authored and co-authored over 30 manuscripts and 7 books, chapters on ageism and aging related topics. Today, she's going to really talk about masking ageism and how can you do that in the workplace to build an age-inclusive New York City. Welcome, Dr. Gendron.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. Hi, everybody. As Maritza said, I'm Tracy Gendron. I come to you from Richmond, Virginia, but I have to admit I am a native New Yorker. It is where I grew up, so my heart is still in New York. I am a gerontologist, and I have been studying aging and ageism for many, many years. So I'm really delighted to see all of the comments in the chat that are really illustrative of the amazing work that you are all doing. And it really does start with the thought work of connecting to what is ageism. So you can feel free to jump to the next slide. And then you can jump one more. So I'm going to just do a quick recap because I think that you are pretty, well aware of what ageism is. Clearly, you have a bit of a background in this, and it's wonderful that you're here wanting to search even deeper to really figure it out. Because the truth is that ageism is actually very, very complicated, and it's more complicated than I think what it first seems. So when we often think of ageism, what we will think about is workplace discrimination. Older people either not having access to get jobs or not being promoted or being looked over or excluded from meetings and from opportunities. And that certainly is a piece of it. But ageism is much larger than that. And it's not just discrimination based on age, although that is the main premise of ageism. It is discrimination against older and younger people. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it feeds into some generational bias and how that creates kind of manufactured tension within society and within the workplace. But ageism is also self-directed. And I think that this is one of the pieces that I really would love for everybody to take away. There's no such thing as a non-aging person. And very often what we do is we other older people, and we think aging is just about older people, when the truth is aging is about all of us. So ageism is relevant to all of us, whether we're young, whether we're old. And the truth is we are all older people in training. So no matter how you look at it, this is about you, this is about your current self, and this is about your future self. And what's so amazing to me is that there are really powerful consequences, negative consequences that have to do with the stress that we carry around when we fear our own aging. So people that fear aging or people that disconnect from their own aging are actually more likely to be sick, to take longer to recover, to have mental health issues, and even to live shorter lifespans. There's a 7.5-year lifespan differential. So part of the why this matters is because it matters to your own health, it matters to your own happiness, and for all of you, it clearly matters to your job and your job satisfaction as well. So ageism is about internal, external, and it's about how we communicate with each other. It's relational. It's the way that we kind of give it back and forth. The little comments that we might make that may disparage being old. The little self-deprecating remarks that we may say of, oh, forgive me, I'm old. I need my glasses to read this. All of that is perpetuating ageism in a relational kind of sense. So ageism is very complicated and multi-layered. Next slide, please. I don't think you can really talk about ageism without talking about intersectionality. And I encourage you all to really think about your own age identity in relation to all of your other forms of identity, because we are one whole being that comes with multiple forms of identity, our racial identity, ability, sexuality, education, class. All of this comes together to create your experience with the world. One of the unique things about aging, and this happens with ability and it happens with some other forms of identity as well, is that it's one of them that change over time. So how you respond to the world and how the world responds to you changes as you age. The world sees you differently at 20 than they do at 30, than they do at 60, than they do at 80. So it's one of those constantly evolving forms of identity that make us really have to think about how we change alongside of it. But as we're talking about ageism and as you do your work moving forward, always keep it in the context of that intersectionality, because all of those factors, either risk factors or protective factors, stay with us our entire lives. So the experience of aging as a Black older woman is going to be different than the experience aging of a white older woman, simply because the forms of our identity shape certain things in our life. So keep that in mind, because I think as we kind of walk through this and you think about it, it's important to have that in front of mind. Next slide. So as I said, one of the other forms of our identity that changes over time is ability. Now, you can have a disability at any form, at any time in your life, but because aging is a process of simultaneous decline and growth, which is what makes it hard for a lot of people to wrap their head around, ableism and ageism are very intertwined. They are conceptually woven together because as we age, the truth is we will experience some level of physical decline. At the same time, we will also experience psychosocial growth. So to see aging as decline is not accurate. To see aging as multidirectional is accurate. But to look at how ageism and ableism intersect is really important. Sometimes something that we think could be ageist might actually end up being ableist. Ableism is about discrimination based on level of ability. So if you're thinking about a work environment and you're thinking about someone that can't be accommodated, whether they're older or not, that could be an issue of ableism rather than ageism. So I think it's important to understand how they fit together and also understanding how they're a little bit separate. Next slide. So I really like to talk about this concept of generations when I'm introducing ageism, because as I said, ageism goes both ways. It is any form of discrimination based on age. The way that we used to talk about generations was based on kind of your familial history, your ancestry. That's how the concept of generations originated. But then it became more of a social kind of construct. And we started to develop these labels to say, all right, we have these people, large groups of people that were born within a 10, 15, 20-year time span. And what we're going to say is that because they lived through the same foundational events, they must have a distinct consciousness. They must have certain likes and dislikes and behaviors and preferences all in common, right? That's what we kind of thought. So we created these little labels, the silent generation, the baby boom generation, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z. And what I'm here to tell you is that I think this concept of generations has actually done us much more harm than it has done us good. So you can go to the next slide. What happens is when we decide to lump people together into any kind of group and we start to make assumptions about their skills, their abilities, their likes and their dislikes, we are moving closer and closer to prejudice, to discrimination, because that may be true, but it may not be true. So we have all of these little labels that have come along with what it means to be a millennial or what it means to be a boomer. And when we give into that, what we end up doing is stereotyping the person in front of us, potentially without even knowing the person in front of us. And here's one of the examples I like to give about why I think this makes no sense. So if you're a baby boomer and you were born in 1946, because that's the very beginning of the baby boomers, it means that you grew up in the 1960s. That was the time when you were in your 20s. The 1960s had a very distinct culture. hippie culture, civil rights movement, assassinations, all kinds of things were in the zeitgeist. And that really shaped who you were. Now, let's say you're a boomer who was born in 1964. That means you grew up in the 1980s. The 1980s, when you were in your 20s, was a completely different time. Cold War, rise of technology, different kind of pop music. And yet we call both of these people boomers and assume as if they have all of these traits in common. And the same is true for every generation. So this is important because when older people discriminate against, let's say, millennials, because everybody blames millennials for everything, they're actually feeding the cycle of prejudice, and they're actually feeding fear of aging and ageism. So it's important that we look at ageism as a whole, and instead of pitting generations against each other, bringing generations together to be unified, to be thinking about things that they have in common. Because the truth is we do have more in common than we do that's apart. If we focus on the differences, we'll find them. If we focus on the commonalities, we'll find them. Next slide, please. So this is kind of that cycle of perpetuation that I was talking about. There are very strong societal messages about what it means to age, what it means to be older, and they largely value youth over older age. And this is just a really quick example of what you will find in any grocery store, on any shelf, in any bookstore. Those messages, they become in us, right? They get internalized and we believe them, and then we feed them back and forth to each other. So this is how ageism and generational bias is perpetuated. When we start to blame each other, when we start to label each other, and when we start to value one state of being over another. The truth is, when you think about youth and you think about older age, neither of them are good or bad. They just are. They are states of being. There really isn't value associated with youth or old age. It's that we assign it value. So what we can do is actually kind of rethink that and start to think about making these terms old and young the neutral terms that they really are, describing somebody that is younger or somebody that is older, but without value attached to it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to leave you with just a few tips of how to get started thinking about disrupting ageism in the workplace. And before I go through these, I will say I believe that the #1 strategy to start disrupting ageism is simply recognizing that you yourself are an aging person and that this matters to you for your health, for your happiness, for a just society, for equity, for inclusion. And I think once we find our why and once we connect with it personally, it becomes a little different, right? This isn't one more initiative or one more thing. This is actually about the development of our future selves and the support of people that are older. But some things you can do in the workplace, you can ensure that ageism and ableism are represented in DEI initiatives. It sounds like you all are well on your way to doing that. You can look at how aging is communicated both formally and informally. So again, it's more than just in policies, but maybe how do you celebrate birthdays? Do you use over-the-hill balloons? Are you making fun of people that are older? Are you blaming millennials for things, either formally or informally? These are the kinds of things, that culture piece, that we really need to examine, and that makes a huge difference. Are you feeding into those generational stereotypes, or are you really starting to think about how people can connect to each other based on their preferences, based on their skills, based on their affinities? And then really working on developing age diverse teams, because I think that truly is the key. And then finally, start looking for those hidden patterns that could be based on assumptions, that could be based on assumptions about age or about generation. Look, we all have bias. Bias is built into our brains, but we also have the ability to take a step back and to think about who the person is that's in front of us, and to challenge ourselves from making an assumption or a judgment to seeing the actual person that is in front of us. And it's called metacognition. So just using that moment to think about our thinking and to challenge the way that we feel about aging and being older. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today, and so proud of you all for doing this. It's such an important topic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gendron. I was hashtagging all your tidbits as fast as I could. Much appreciated. Here's Dr. Gendron's book. If you have an opportunity, check it out. And Dr. Gendron, I don't know if you can stick around, but we're going to have breakout rooms. So we'd love to place you in one, just in case if you can make it. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Now I'd love to introduce my colleague at DCAS, Saida Alam, who's the policy and program strategist, who's going to kick us off in best practices for recruiting and retaining a multi-generational workforce. Hello, Saida.
Thank you, Maritza, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I love the words shared by Dr. Gendron right now. Absolutely wonderful and inspiring. So it is my pleasure to be here. I am with my colleagues also, Katie Natar and Jerry Warman. Today, we will be speaking broadly about best practices for recruiting and retaining multi-generational workforce. Within that, I will give a brief overview of a tool, a data tool that is accessible for everyone joining us here today. Next slide. So of course, we want to encourage everyone to build DAI strategies that are based on data. And there's a wealth of information that is available to us from citywide workforce data, or citywide workforce report. So this report is generally housed on the DCAS website. It's under the reports tab. And within there, there's a specific link that takes you to an interactive tool. For that, we already provided that link on our slides here, which will be circulated to everyone, but that link, that tool is called Shiny Apps for this purposes. The latest data that is available there is from fiscal year 2019, and it provides a citywide breakdown. And you can also request your agency-specific information for more current data from your NYCAPS report. So EEO officers joining here today have access to your current data on NYCAPS. And if you don't have access to the report, you can request access from NYCAPS Central at dcasnyc.gov. Now, when I'm saying current data, that might be more in fiscal year 2020 or fiscal year 2021. And that workforce information includes breakdown by age, gender, and any other years of service. And it is available via CHRMS, which provides an employee roster profile query. Within the query, you can look at your active employees with various employee details. And if you need assistance with this data set, please contact your agency HR department who has access to, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, SHRM or CHRMS for now. So that's the acronym. So if you need access to it in NYCAPS, your HR APO partner will have it, so you can reach out to them. Next slide. So as I was mentioning earlier, my colleagues will share more details on the strategies that you can use within your agency to build robust DEI strategy. On this part, I will give you an overview of the interactive tool that is accessible. So once you click on the link that was shared in the previous slide, you will land on this page that shows NYC DCAS logo, and you'll have to navigate the left bar to get information on your specific agency. So you will see that you have the option of stats by agency, and once you click on it, there will be a list of all the agencies and a drop-down menu. And from that drop-down menu, you can choose your agency to focus on. Within the employee demographics, which is right below the drop-down menu, it provides a wealth of information. It breaks down your workforce data by multiple categories, including gender, employee age, employee years of service. You will see all the tables, most of the charts and tables are interactive. You can dig deeper and go even further into the analysis by clicking on key indicator by title. So once you click on that, you will see that you will have charts by titles and the top 10 titles and job category as well. Next slide. So for the purpose of this presentation right now, I'm highlighting some of the tables, data tables that are accessible to you. As mentioned earlier, there is furthermore. So I strongly encourage you to play around with your workforce report. Right now, we're just highlighting the tables that focuses on the age. I'm spotlighting our agency partner DFTA here. And if you just look at this overview of their workforce, they have about 307 employees in their agency. And within their agency, one of the first categories of breakdown is the median age of the workforce. And their average age is 54, which is slightly higher than the category of their agency, which is the health category, and it's about 11 years higher than the citywide age range as well. And if you look at it for other intentional purposes, you can also see gender and median salary and eligibility to retire. So that this is one of the many tables that are available to you. Next table, next slide. Here again, I am highlighting the employee age chart. If you see in the middle, it shows the age bracket for each of these for the service. So here I'm highlighting DCAS in comparison to citywide. So for example, 11% of DCAS, 11% of the workforce at DCAS are between the age of 40 and 44. And then about 12% are from 45 to 49 and 13% from 50 to 54. If you just combine those three categories, over more than 1/3 of the workforce are between the age of 40 to 54. As this is a very interactive tool, if you just hover your mouse around on these bars, you can also see that age breakdown. Now, again, just a reminder, these are from fiscal year 2019. If you want more actual, just the raw data, it is available to you in NICAPS. And then the next slide. And this also shows the employee years of service. Again, the age is in the middle, and it the bar shows the percentage of your workforce that is represented within that years of service. Now, some of these things, again, my colleagues will go further into, next slide, please. My colleague will go further into sharing the strategies. But for some of it, for us, it was just interesting to look at, and for those who will be developing the strategies, for interested to look at how many years of service, or maybe you would want to look at the retirement eligibility of your employee for your workforce. Because for here, I'm highlighting an agency that, for example, has child welfare specialist group, a job category, a title where about 62% of its workforce will, within that title, are going to be eligible for retirement in 2019. Now, of course, that does not mean that all 62% of them are going to be retiring in 2019. That is when they will be eligible. But if you are thinking about it, you can potentially consider a mentorship program. So knowledge sharing is does take place between the multi-generational workforce. You could also be thinking about a succession plan, building a succession plan. You could also consider in having some of these workforce to stay and continue, like retain them and continue their service either through the Silver Stars program or similar strategy that my colleague will share. Next. So I will now pass this on to Executive Director at Citywide Equity and Inclusion, Katie Natar. Hi, Katie, and I think
thank you. I usually mute on my phone and then on my computer. Thank you so much, Saida. Really appreciate it. And again, as Saida mentioned, my name is Katie Natar, and I am the Executive Director within Citywide Equity and Inclusion. And it's really important to look at your data, because you don't want to just jump up and say, oh, I need to focus on recruitment, when that is not your problem. You need to focus on retention, or you're pretty good at retention. It's the recruitment part that's the issue. And so looking at your data will guide you with where it is that you need to focus on. And so this has already been mentioned, making sure that you do already make a conscious effort to include age as a part of your D&I focus. This is key in making sure that you keep it at top of mind Although, of course, it's illegal to make a hiring decision based specifically on age, noting it within the list of your diversity attributes, make sure that you're thinking about all of the unconscious things that can be considered when people make decisions, and the biases that may be applied to when we're reviewing resumes and say, oh, this is a AOL address. Maybe we will not, select that person because they may not have whatever assumptions we want to make. You also want to consider the intersectionality of age among the other characteristics such as sex, ethnicity, and or disability that we already, apply to when we're thinking about D&I strategies. Knowing your workforce numbers and continue to monitor them throughout the recruitment process. It's not really, okay, I'm starting recruitment, let me look at them right now, and then I'm not going to check them again until a year from now. You need to continue to monitor this, if you're creating a strategy to recruit for a particular title, do a check-in. If you are the HR person or you're the D&I folks, you can work with your EEO office because they have applicant data. You can check to see, well, is my strategy working? Am I attracting different demographics? What am I getting for the work that I'm putting out there? So you can always review that information. You want to make sure that you examine your current recruitment practices to identify any gaps or wherever they may be. And training is important. That's why we put in that question in there to make sure that you are aware of the trainings and why they're available, because we want to make sure that your recruiters and your hiring managers are trained on the diversity and inclusion training, such as unconscious bias and structured interviewing, because I can tell you, you can have the best policy, the best practices, but if the person that's responsible for going out and doing the recruitment, if they're not aware of certain things that may be roadblocks in getting the right people into your agency, then it becomes an issue. So it's really important to make sure that we're training the people that play a role into not just recruiting, retention, and everything that plays into building a diverse workforce. Next, please. Job description, but I can skip this because most of you mentioned that you've already been doing this, right? You went back and you're reviewing your job description and you're looking at the ageist language that's included, and you're recognizing and knowing why it's important not to include them. So recent college grads, the go-getters, the high energy. And honestly, before this, I didn't really think there was anything that was wrong with high energy. Like, yeah, I used to say we work in a fast-paced environment because people are just on the go. But the more that we do this and the more that we recognize why there may be a challenge with that, and really it's more about saying what it is that you need, right? You need somebody that's entry. The position itself is entry level. You need somebody that's productive. It's going to be highly engaged, that can be adaptable to anything that's going. So be more specific about the behaviors and the skills that you're looking for. We want to make sure that we're emphasizing the benefits that are attractive to both a younger and older workers. I once took a job because free lunch was being offered on Fridays. Yes, that was the only reason I took that job, because I just graduated school. I once took the job for the MetroCard, but also the paid job for the free lunches. But that may attract me because I was somebody that haven't offering that. You're assuming that the person doesn't necessarily have a family, or they may be somebody that is a younger person. But when you do something like that, you're not really looking at a larger skill set of people that you may want to attract. So please make sure that you're mindful of that, and think about the message that you're sending in your job description. Thinking about who you're looking to attract. Look at the marketing tools. Go on your agency website. Maybe that would be what you do after this session, right? Look at the imagery, the employee profiles, the social media activities. What are you doing? How does it reflect that the agency welcomes a broader, both older and younger candidates? Circulate your job advertisements widely as possible in both digital and non-digital platforms. We all, use social media platforms in different ways, but we also have to think about making sure that it gets to a wider audience. And if we're really thinking about being inclusive in our recruitment practices. And I'm very thankful that I took that job because I would not be where I am today. Next. Next, please. Your internal sourcing strategies, right? It's the same thing that you would do when you're thinking about recruiting for people with disability, people who are of different ethnic background, people who are within the LGBTQ community, right? Take what you already have and apply it to this new diversity group that you're looking for. Leveraging your career development initiatives and connect them with the internal job postings. External sourcing. Post open positions on diversity-focused job boards like AARP or American Society for the Aging, their career page. Partner with community colleges in their retraining programs for older adults. Libraries, community boards, religious organizations. Go to seminars and career fairs and think about who you're putting at your table, who's representing you and your agency at the career fairs. Think about the rehires for retirees. We have representatives from DFTA who will talk about that later. And think about your interviews. Is your interview panel diverse? Not just diverse in gender, not diverse in cultural background, but diverse in age. Make sure that it's a well-represented panel who can make unbiased decisions based on who's being hired. And make sure anyone that's participating in the interviewing process that, first of all, you're using structured interview, right? You guys should know this, especially if you are D&I and HR and EEO. Structured interviewing, meaning that you're using the same questions for everyone for that same position, and you have a scoring mechanism that are predefined, but also that those hiring managers, those interviewers are trained on structured interviewing. And these are just those small little things that you already using in your D&I practices and incorporating so that you can make sure that we are being inclusive across the board when we think of who we're hiring within the agency. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are not saying, hey, I have 2 great candidates, but I'm going to select this candidate because of their age or because of their sex. You want to make sure that you're creating a candidate pool so you have a greater opportunity that the best candidate that you select is going to be within a diversity that's representative of the city that we serve. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Jerry Warman, who is the Program and Policy Analyst within the Policy and Program Development team. Jerry?
Thank you very much, Kadian. So I guess that I was asked to talk about retention strategies because DCAS keeps retaining me and retaining me and retaining me and doesn't seem able to stop. So I wanted to start with general principles of retention, which the values that should guide every good employer, really. Employees need, and the most important retention strategy is really, that's why it's underlined on the slide, is employees need to know that their work is acknowledged and appreciated. Job satisfaction, liking your work, what you are doing, liking your job is the strongest contributor to working longer. But also employees need and want continuous professional development. It shouldn't stop at onboarding. It shouldn't stop for younger workers. It should be available along your all working life. You need to learn new developments in your field. You need to be trained in technology, which is changing rapidly. You need to improve your task and project management skills. But also you need to find a good balance between work, family, all sorts of other obligations. And there are ways to structure work environment that makes it easier for employees to carry out their multiple obligations. So More specifically, there are some retention strategies that help accomplish these tasks. Sometimes it is necessary to reconceive work for mature employees. They should be included in diversity programs as an identified and valued group. They can lead special project, be assigned special project to take advantage of their knowledge, experience, expertise, and it might include serving on task forces or in temporary assignments, which involve either full-time or part-time work. Other flexible work arrangements. Workers who are already eligible for retirement benefits, for them flexibility may be the deciding factor whether they stay or retire, or they could be offered bridge employment. That's a strategy that bridges the gap between late career and full retirement, and it typically involves reduced work hours, perhaps responsibilities, perhaps workload. And also, you can, for those employees who are already retired, you can offer them part-time employment, and there is a special city program. They can work part-time and collect full pension under so-called 211 waiver. But Marlo Paraiso from DFTA will talk about it more when he introduces you to the Silver Stars program. And then more specifically and more generally, support health and wellness, provide caregiver support, provide career and personal growth opportunities, create mixed age groups. I mean, they're sometimes created naturally because some people have worked in a unit longer, some shorter. So that is an easy thing. Create teamwork, cooperation, where tasks are shared and where you have cross-generational training in skills or knowledge. That's also part of job restructuring. People can share their experience while working together on a project. And you sometimes need to redesign the job, adjust the work, the structure of work to match worker capabilities. So now we will break into groups, and Kadian will tell us what we are supposed to do in those breakout sessions. So Kadian, back to you.
Thank you so much, Shari. So pretty much we're tired of talking and we want you to do the talking. So first thing we want you to do is to turn on your camera. If you have a camera on your computer, please turn it on and make sure your audio is connected. We are going to break you out automatically into sessions. We are going to have 3 questions for you to review. We are encouraging you to take a picture of the questions, although we'll post them in the chat. But just to make sure, if you have any issues reviewing the questions, if you can just take a picture, that'll be great. Discuss the questions in your breakout room. For the sake of time, as soon as you enter the room, just make a note of your room number, which will be at the top. Please make a note of your room number. Choose a note taker and a spokesperson. So when you come back into the room, somebody will read out a response to the question. And of course, as I mentioned, to encourage engagement, please make sure that your camera is turned on. We will use 10 minutes for the breakout session. So we do, encourage you to use that time to engage. We don't often get a chance to be together, especially the APOs, EEO officers, and DNI folks. So we really encourage you to use this time wisely. Now, the questions that we'll have is, 1, if your agency has initiatives engaging older workers, describe what they are and how they are implemented. If you do not have any age-specific initiative, what are some of your current DEI initiatives within your agency that can be applied to age inclusion, right? As I mentioned, just tie it together. You already do something. It's definitely something that can be applied to age inclusion. Second, what do you think would be some of the challenges in implementing age-inclusive initiatives within your agency? And what role would HR, EEO, and the D&I team play in those challenges, if any? And how do you measure success of your current strategies that you have, or what are some of the ways success can be measured for any of the new initiatives that you guys think about? If you are in a room and you guys come up with a lot of initiatives, because you know, city employees, you just have so many thoughts going on, you can just choose one to discuss in the interest of time. So Pat is going to handle the breakout rooms. You will get a pop-up on your screen automatically. Just make sure that you click it in. You just click to join the chat. When you come back.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. We're inviting some of you to share out some of the insights that you've gained as in your breakout rooms. And we'd like you to raise your hands and come onto the screen if you'd like to share what was exchanged with the group. So let's see. If I look at this participant list, would anyone like to share? I know you've chosen a spokesperson per room.
There is so I was in room 5 and I had a very engaging conversation with Renee, who has raised her hand, and she will share her program at her agency.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if my hand had raised because I'm not on the screen. Hi, my name is Renee Gregory, and I am the Chief of Diversity at the Kings County District Attorney's Office. And one of the things that we do is we just don't look for staff in the typical places, although we do have a broad range of where we do look for potential staff members, but we also try to attend job fairs that target people who are employees who may be starting over again or who have finished up an amount of time in a certain employment, and they're now looking for something else, because we recognize that bringing experience to the agency is very important.
Thank you so much, Renee, for sharing that with us. Thank you very much. And do we have another hand raised? Team, and for some reason, I can't see the hands that are raised.
Right now, I don't see any.
Okay.
I'm not sure if
Belinda.
anyone...
I think Belinda and Lisa are, I'm not sure if they're in separate rooms, but I saw Belinda's hand first. Go for it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So my group had a really engaging conversation as well, and but it was focused on retention. So the agencies in the room talked through where age was a component that. So, for instance, there's either the agency has the majority is similar in age or generation, and then we had someone from a uniformed agency where age is a requirement for some of the jobs, and then we had another agency that where most of the workforce is on the younger end. So recruitment and retention really focused on where we talked about was just the generations, right? And what the workforce looks like for them. So, for an older workforce, are we going to retain them to retirement? And what is it that we need for that group? For a younger workforce, world of work means they might be with us for 5 years or less. Let's make it the best 5 years that we can and hope that, they stay longer. And then for those where age is a requirement for the job, like uniformed agencies, succession planning and growth may be most important to them within the age range that they are for the job. So that was some interesting points that everybody brought up.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Thank you for sharing. And we have Lisa Atkinson, who has her hand up, would like to share. We'd like to invite Lisa onto the screen. And please unmute yourself.
I'm actually not on the camera, but
okay.
So I'm Lisa Atkinson. I am DOB's Deputy EEO Officer. So I'm new to the agency since December. And so basically we talked about in it is our initiatives. It's not necessarily to engage the older workers because we have them. What is that a lot of people are retiring. And so what we're trying to do is getting the younger workers to certain positions like the inspector and plan examiner. A lot of people don't know what it takes to be those positions, and especially, they don't know what they're required. So our HR units are trying to do a lot of youth outreach, get a youth leadership council to work with high school students so they can be mentored by our older employees so they can come in with knowledge about what it takes to be an inspector, what it takes to be a plan examiner, how they can take, if they're like digital graphic, majors, they can actually take that and work in our hub unit and they can design things. So we're working on programs like that. I'm trying to get a mentorship program in here for all employees so we can, people can maybe cross-train in different positions so they can know. So we won't be, when people start retiring, we don't have enough people for the positions for inspectors and plan examiners, and that's a big thing here. Also, we talked about, New Jersey and myself talked about getting college aides in, and I recently hired our former college aide as one of our investigators. And the biggest thing has been trying to teach her about being a city employee and what is her, the details that she has to learn, like explaining to her what her job description is, because she's no longer a college age, she is now a city employee. That's the biggest thing, her not understanding to like simple things like you have to call your employee and tell them you're not coming in. So those are the kind of things that we're dealing with. And I think that's something that's kind of hard when you were explaining to younger people coming into the city that you can't work from home, you can't work remotely because that's not what the mayor wants us to do. So those are a lot of things that we've discussions that we were talking about.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's really sort of a holistic approach. And I really appreciate all of the strategies that you shared with everyone right now. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
So we have Mark Glenn that has his hand raised. And before we bring Mark on, I would like to encourage others to share some insights around some of the questions that haven't been addressed. So please get your responses ready if you were the designated spokesperson. And right now we're going to hear from Mark Glenn. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I was in room 1. It had a full room, didn't catch everyone's name, but if there was a theme in our discussion, I think we talked about the challenges to making the workplace age inclusive and what initiatives should look like and how they're devised. We certainly had a representative from a uniform agency, and I believe she was speaking of in terms of age limits. When someone reaches a certain age, they have to leave the organization, and what value are you then discarding or turning away just because that's the requirement? And it creates that, not so much a divide, but are we missing out just simply because someone has to leave the agency? We spoke in terms of is a culture in place to where someone wants to stay anyway? Is it a friendly place? Is it a place where you're valued and a place where you've grown and you have more to give? Is that culture in place anyway where you want to stay on when you've reached that time to retire or leave the agency? We also spoke in terms of who is having the discussion about these initiatives. Or is it a siloed discussion? Is it solely on HR? Is it solely on EEO? Is it solely on DEI personnel? Should it be a cross-sectional or even someone not in that space included in the conversation? So it's a robust, diverse conversation going on. And we talked about the sentiment of, excuse me, if older workers are being aged out in your quote unquote viewed as the dinosaur, your input amongst younger teams maybe not exactly land as well as you like, and you're viewed as that dinosaur. The group kind of took the position. If you're going to be the dinosaur, be at the top of the food chain and be the T-Rex and just go ahead and say what you got to say anyway, and you know, kind of make it known, one big loud roar and get the ball rolling. So it was a fun conversation, but the point was, how do we do it? Who should do it in order to get to the correct why and what? And that's our 2 cents.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, cross-sectoral, cross-divisional, bringing everyone to the table. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. And we're gonna move the presentation forward now. And I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Marlo Paraiso. He's the director of the Silver Stars program, and he's gonna give you a bit more details and insight about the program. Welcome, Marlo.
Thank you so much, Yvette, for those kind words, and really appreciate the rich conversation, and really, you know, a conversation based on data to really allow us to be strategic as we move forward, and really ensuring that we're able to meet the varying needs of New York City residents with quality staffing. So really excited to share with you how DFTA can be a resource in helping everyone in this room achieve our collective goal of ensuring that the city is an age-inclusive workforce. First piloted at the Administration for Children's Services, ACS, Silver Stars allows city agencies to develop part-time project-based opportunities for city retirees looking to return to the workforce without impact to their city pension. This program is designed to allow city agencies to leverage talent, really recruiting and hiring individuals who are already familiar with city government and the many tools used in city operations. In other words, really helping sure that the person is hitting the ground running. Also really allowing city agencies to continue with business operations and opportunity for succession planning. In terms of benefit to city retirees, really allowing them to share knowledge gained throughout successful careers, benefiting less experienced employees and ultimately New York City agencies, really helping with mentorship, right? And that knowledge transfer, and also helping them maintain productive social and vibrant lifestyles. Allowing them to get a renewed sense of purpose to their work, and really, I think, overcoming social isolation. We often hear of that colleague that, you know, retired, last year or even last month, and for one reason or another, something came up, depression, etc. And the goal of the program for Silver Stars is really overcoming that social isolation and really making sure that retirees remain connected to their network. And helping individuals supplement their income. As I mentioned earlier, Silver Stars allows a city retiree to continue collecting their city pension. So how does this work? We work with city agencies such as ACS, such as the fire department, to identify short-term project-based opportunities. So the goal is for these short-term employment opportunities, project-based opportunities, to last no longer than a year. City agencies are also responsible for identifying the funding. For programmatic stance, our goal is really to ensure that a city retiree does not earn more than $35,000 in a calendar year. So we're really talking about January through December. So we work in partnership with the city agencies to develop these opportunities, making sure they're short-term, project-based. The goal is, as I mentioned, to recruit individuals who are retired from city service. So what does that mean? The person must not have any existing sick or vacation time. So when they start their placement, they must be totally off city payroll. So we recently had our first Silver Stars here at the Department for the Aging. They help support our health insurance information and counseling program, HICAP. This individual has 20 years of experience, most recently working at the Department of Health, really a subject matter expert on budgets and contracts. So Yvette, is the video, can we show the video?
Here it is.
What made you decide to become a Silver Star?
It's a great deal of flexibility and, personalized work arrangements, which I found appealing as well, and more appealing than other alternative retirement options that might be out there. And I found out it was also with the Department of Aging, which I've always was interested in working for, because I have an interest in gerontology. And it was an opportunity to use some of my years of experience and skills in a familiar environment. So that was like the initial, and it didn't help. It didn't hurt that it didn't impact my pension as well. So that was a good thing.
For more information on Silver Stars, you can visit our website at nyc.gov/aging/silverstars or scan the QR code. You can also email us at silverstars@aging.nyc.gov.
So I just want to give a shout out to Kimberly Schulsta, who is my associate on Silver Stars, the brainchild behind this video. That is her voice you heard, not my voice, but really excited to see how we could really leverage this, right? Or really leverage Silver Stars as a resource, as a tool to really ensure that the city is positioned to be age inclusive. I think we need to continue to, reframe the dialogue and really understand that, a lot of people have a lot of skills, experiences, and they're not done contributing. So if you have any questions, shoot us an email. If you want more information about Silver Stars, as well as the other senior employment programs that the agency manages, runs, please visit our website by scanning the QR code. So thank you so much for your time. Look forward to connecting with folks, connecting them to opportunities, especially city agencies developing Silver Star placements.
Thank you, Marlo. Silver Stars is truly a win-win, a win for a city retiree and a win for the agency. So please do reach out to Marlo and Kimberly here at DFTA. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Kamika Dempsey. Kamika and I go a long way back. 2005, when we were at an education startup. And it's been a thrill to see her career trajectory and making a really tremendous impact in the DEI sector. She's highly sought expert, right, on the intersection of business, people, and DEI strategy in the workplace. She advises C-level executives, diverse leaders, and teams in Fortune 500 firms and startups. Prior, to starting her firm, she was VP of Global Talent Management at BlackRock, where she led diverse talent strategy for 6 businesses at Goldman Sachs Office of Global Leadership and Diversity. Welcome, Kamika. Thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much, Maritza, for that really nice introduction. It's lovely to be here. Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm delighted and so excited to be here for this important series of discussions. So if we could just go to the next slide, please. So we're really in the midst of change. The state of work today is challenging and it's changing. As the focus of the conversation today has been about the 5 different generations that are in the workforce. We are also in the midst of a global pandemic, and it's impacted New Yorkers differently, and it's not over. People are working longer than ever, well beyond the traditional retirement age. The racial wealth gap in the United States is wider than ever, and the pandemic has made it worse for Black and Brown people in particular. We're also in the midst of a mental health crisis. Inflation has risen, and Goldman Sachs predicted just last week that we're 38% likely to experience a recession in the United States, up from prior predictions and market indicators. Climate change is here. We're in the midst of the Great Resignation and so much more. Next slide, please. While this might seem dire, there is hope, or at least I have hope, because New York City remains the greatest city in the world. So we have a very unique opportunity to lead the way as the world and the US is changing. We have such a rich cultural fabric, unlike anywhere else in the world. The number of languages that are spoken, the number of countries that are represented, the number of racial and ethnic identities that are here, and the number of cultural institutions that we have that support those groups, the number of veterans that are here who have served our country, the number of people who are disabled and choose to make New York City their home, and so much more. We really have to be very intentional about how to tap into the rich benefits of the richness richness of this diversity in our amazing city. Next slide, please. So as leaders across the city, you really have the opportunity to lead the way with building strong and vibrant culture within your agencies and departments. But how do you begin when this opportunity may seem like such a large undertaking with so many unique challenges? My recommendations is really start with two things. Start with creating a common language. The language that we use around diversity, equity, and inclusion is not as consistently understood across the board as we might think. So be specific about words and their definitions and what they mean. Be specific about what you mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, culture, and belonging within your agencies and departments. And the second is orient yourselves and your behavior as you start to implement DEI action plans towards inquiry. Ask questions. Who are you as an agency or department today? And what would make you a better agency or department tomorrow? Next slide, please. Really, some of you may have heard folks say about thinking about strategy and plans and implementing strategy and plans that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So really thinking about your culture across the employee life cycle is very, very critical. Most people only focus on recruiting when thinking about DEI programs and planning, but that's very short-sighted. You really need to think about the entire employee life cycle because the hard work of inclusion happens after people are hired. How are you recruiting during these times? The challenges that I laid out are many, but what are you doing to recruit during these times? How are you describing, your culture to candidates? What's the onboarding experience? So once people start to come into the organization to your agencies or your departments, what's their onboarding experience? How are people welcomed? How do you show that they are valued at the team and department or agency level? What do you invest in when you think about their development? What do you invest in to develop the talent that you have today? Are these opportunities utilized strategically? Are they marketed or made available to everyone? What gaps do you currently have and what might you need to do to close them? Next slide, please. So, I like to be very practical. So what's the practical message on how to get it done? It's really about embedding these DEI practices into your culture so that it's such a day-to-day experience and it's a lived experience. There is not some culture fairies that are going to come sprinkle culture fairy dust. It's going to be each and every person who is working with the city who is going to be responsible to be an ambassador of these DEI practices as they come to life within your respective agencies. Next slide, please. So how do you get started? You start wherever you are. Wherever you are today, there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. Wherever you are is the right place to start. Next slide, please. How do you exercise what I call your DEI muscles? I really want to encourage you all to really lead with inquiry. If you lead with inquiry, you will inherently lead with empathy and understanding. And then when you think that you've heard enough by listening, pause and ask just one more question. There may be more to uncover and learn about the state of DEI where you are on your DEI journey than you might know today. Really seek first to understand what people are thinking and experiencing today, and then start to formulate your plan. Next slide, please. And the reason that I suggest really orienting oneself toward a frame and a behavior of inquiry is because inquiry opens the door for people to feel included, for people to feel seen, and for people to feel heard, and to offer new ideas and solutions. When in doubt, rely on inquiry as a practical tactic. And I love this quote by Marjorie Kaplan, who's the former president at Animal Planet. And she says, I want people to feel brave about their ideas. It's really about saying, bring your best self. Bring your best self every day to work. Bring your best self to the conversation. Bring your best self to the presentation. And we will give you something back. We're investing in you. You're investing in us. We're investing in you. And I think that really sets such a positive tone to then, next slide, please, talk about pragmatic tips on getting started and where you should begin. So here are the tips that I share with you today to get started with your DEI planning. 1, start with your data. Assess your current state. Know your numbers today and be clear about what you're tracking. Again, because one of the earlier questions that I asked you is, where are you today? But what would make you a better department or agency tomorrow? The data is going to help you to perhaps answer that question. The second is to create a clear vision. Decide what will be the overall greatest impact for your agency or your department. Paint the picture of what success looks like for your agency. 3, make a plan. And I really want to be specific about this. Make a plan that includes no more than 3 to 5 goals that you will execute once you get going. You will likely find, and this is the reason that I suggest 3 to 5 as a maximum, you will find that once you get going, those big goals will inherently lead to many smaller sub goals. And so if you start to then add 10 goals, well, then it's 10 goals that maybe you only do one or two things to advance those 10 goals. Best to actually really be tight and focused on 3 to 5 goals and actually execute them 100%. And then this connects to the next one, which is accountability. Determine what specifically you need to monitor to track and monitor your progress. How will you know that you're moving forward? What are going to be the metrics of success for your specific agency to know that you are moving? If you think about a scale of 1 to 10, and if you rate yourself in the assessment stage and you say, okay, you know what, today we are a 5 on this and tomorrow we want to be a 6, how will you know that you've moved from 5 to 6? And then number 5, time. Create a timeline with clear deadlines that you can share. Things will get done as long as there are deadlines and as long as those deadlines are communicated and understood by everyone. Number 6, communicate. This is all excellent work, but it doesn't go anywhere if you don't share that you're doing it. Particularly in the state of the city that we are in today, people need to know that this is important to the city. People need to know that this is important to your agencies and to your departments. You have to let them know. So plan a communication strategy that is going to share your progress both internally and externally. And then lastly, number 7, be pragmatic. Keep it simple and plain. This is very challenging work. And again, when I laid out the state of the world that we are in today, it's very challenging. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overcomplicate your plan because that will undermine your progress. This is an amazing time to be in New York City, at least in my opinion. For so many people, it's New York or nowhere. They have a pop-up store in Soho where you can buy gear, and they did not pay me to say that. It's just very exciting to be a member and a resident in New York City. So my hope is that you are inspired to create the New York City that everyone will always want to call home. Next slide, please. If you'd like to continue the conversation and chat with me further after this, you can always find me on Twitter, use the hashtag #InspiringDEIAction so that I will know it's you and you are part of this session today. And I want to thank you, next slide, for allowing me to join you here today. I'm really so admire so much all of the work that you all are doing in really thinking about the ageism conversation in particular, because so many out there are not, but it is a really critical conversation to have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamika. What did I tell y'all today? Lots of insights, lots of information. Kamika, can you stay with us a few more minutes for Q&A? Look, hands are going up. Okay, let's see. Okay. Oh, I thought I saw a hand. All right. So City of New York, we have an expert. Yes?
Hey, Maritza, sorry, it's Katie. I just want to make a note that we are a bit over time. So for anyone that's here that do need to head off, please do so. But if you can hang around for a few minutes for the Q&A, please do so. But I just want to be mindful if some folks have to leave, they are able to do so as well. Thank you. I'll be here.
Yes, yes, I typed it in the chat as well. So hopefully, you know, folks can stay, but like you said, we will share this. Okay. Oh, so I was saying, right, take leverage. We've got an expert here. Who would like to start off with question for Kamika? We are not shy in New York City. There's a lot of thank yous coming your way, Kamika, for an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much. I see all the thank yous in the chat. Thank you everyone for having me here today.
Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to ask one more time if anyone's questions. If not, Kamika, right, I know is heading to the next presentation. She's a very busy person. Oh, thank you, Mark. Mark has a question.
One, thank you for the presentation. Two, in terms of time, what's a good window? When do you know you've given something sufficient time to birth and grow, or maybe even, you know, turn the tide and shut it down, try another approach?
That's a really excellent question, Mark. I think, you know, some of it depends on what the actual goal is, but generally speaking, I like to track progress on things for a minimum of 90 days, but breaking that down into a 30, 60, and 90-day window. So taking a quick pulse at day 30 and sort of say, okay, so how are we going on this? Does this seem to be working? Then checking in again, you know, has it moved any further in the 60-day timeline? And then I think by the 90-day window, when it's a 3-month mark, you know, that's a full quarter, you know, you'll really get a sense of, okay, is this something that we can continue forward with? Or is this one of those things where we're realizing, you know what, we tried this and it doesn't really seem to be working? Or we tried this, it's giving us a good bit of information. We probably need to make some changes or modifications, and then we can go forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Maritza, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. So we're at 2:34, Kamika, and we are right, the city of New York. We got right to get back to serving the public. I am so grateful for your time here, Kamika, and all of your insights. Looking forward to our continued partnership and friendship. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's been a pleasure. You know, Assistant Commissioner of Public-Private Partnerships here at DFTA has been a pleasure to facilitate. And I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Kadian, from DCAS. Thank you, Kadian.
Thank you. And I am not going to do this because what Kamika told us to do is what we need. This is just a follow-up for us. Think about those 7 key steps that were pointed out and how you can apply it to your annual diversity and EEO plan that will be asking you for fiscal year 2023. So these are some of the key inputs that were put out there, and I think it came at the right time, as we'll be talking about later on, like what are the agencies doing? How are we doing things a little bit differently from what we've been doing in the past? Like how are we increasing the work that we're doing when it comes to D&I? This information will be shared with you, but I love the points that Kamika mentioned in the 7 steps, and I am going to start working on them immediately. So we're going to leave you with that. We will share these slides with you along with our contact information so that we are respectful of your time. Thank you so much. Really appreciate everything. And we will continue to see you guys. EEO officers meeting, APO meetings, we will be in contact with you. And of course, we'll send you any further follow-ups from this, poll questions and so forth, so that we can continue to get feedback on how we continue this conversation, because it's really an important conversation, an important topic, and we want to make sure that it's continuous. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you again. Thank you.